Does the government have a say in when you will retire? Does anyone besides you have a say in when you're going to retire? That's the question. In fact, back, I think it was in the 80s or 70s, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act was passed, and it made forced retirement for people in the United States illegal. In some cases, though, it's still allowed. Let me bring in my show co-host here, Tony Shore. Welcome to the show, Tony. We're going to be talking about your forced retirement from this show. I'm thinking 2024 is the year in which you are forced to retire.
Dan, that's super hurtful. Dan, that's super hurtful.
I've been thinking about it for a while. No, have you heard of any forced retirement in your neck of the woods?
Not if you by forced retirement, if you mean somebody being laid off or let go because of their age or asked to retire. I personally haven't heard of it in many years. Now, when I was in high school, I remember people my mom worked with. And I remember companies I worked when I first started full-time jobs, people were, I'm being forced out. They want me to retire. I remember hearing that from people in my parents' conversation with their friends. That happened quite a bit at companies, I think back in the day, where if they hit a certain age, they were kind of asked to leave. I did briefly do media packaging when I first moved back to Minnesota. I've worked radio for 35 years, but to make money when I first moved back from Nashville, because my wife got a good job here, I did media packaging for a big, huge print company owned by the same guy who owns the Timberwolves. And I remember that there were some older workers that had been with that print company for a long, long time, and they wanted to keep working, but they were like, the one guy was 70, and so they kind of nudged him out, right? Or asked him to retire.
Yeah, well, 70's the new 60.
Yeah, that's true. People are living longer, so I don't know. Well, I haven't heard about that, though, in a long time.
It is illegal, but there are some industries that still force retirement. We're going to talk about those. But
in the U.S.?
Yes, in the U.S. And the government doesn't necessarily force you to retire, but it influences. I think some of the programs we have influence people. Social Security stops growing at 70.
That's true.
So why delay Social Security past 70? I've been getting a lot of not hate mail. I won't say hate mail, but some comments about people disagreeing with my previous show. I'll put the show up here about using your retirement savings and delaying Social Security. God forbid you delay Social Security. That's the stupidest thing ever, according to some people. But
really, people think that.
Yeah,
huh?
But watch that show if you're thinking about it. But if you are past 70, your Social Security doesn't continue to increase. So the government's basically saying, they're not telling you to take it, but they're saying, we're not going to give you any more if you don't take it. So you might as well. Same thing with Medicare. You get it at 65, and that's usually, hey, here's Medicare. See you later, right? Time to leave the workforce because we're giving you health insurance now. You don't have to take it, though. Again, you don't have to take Social Security at 62. You could wait till 70. You don't have to take Medicare. You don't have to take Part B at 65. You could delay it if you're still working and have good coverage.
But I have a question about Social Security that stops growing at 70. You said, why would you delay past that because it stops growing? But if you're still working full-time in a career, you're probably at your highest earning point. And let's say you're 71 and you still got a full-time job. If I take Social Security, does that rule still apply where, let's say I take it at 70, but I'm still working full-time, like I'm 71, I'm still working full-time, and because I've taken Social Security, for every $2 I earn, they take $1 back in Social Security. Does that rule still apply?
No, it does not. And I'll put the link to the
Okay.
show on that for
So
you
it's
to
not going to
watch and
affect. So you
refresh.
might as well take it. You better take it at 70 then, even if you're
You got to
still
watch that
working.
show because you've forgotten. The rule
I did.
changes. Once you hit your full retirement age, they don't withhold any of your Social Security benefit.
Okay. That was my
Yes.
question. I just wanted to clarify.
Mm.
That was my question. But back to people, you're getting people that are saying the dumbest thing to do is delay Social Security. All they have to do is look at the math. If you
Tony, math, wizardry, we don't care about that. Again, no, some people it makes total sense to take it early, some people it doesn't.
Well, my
But
grandfather lived to 100 years old. Had he taken Social Security early at 62, he literally would have just left hundreds of thousands of dollars, well over $100,000.
again, though, not everyone's going to live to 100 years old. But, and by the way, retirement does not equal claiming Social Security. A lot of people get that. So they think the two go hand in hand. They don't. You could retire from your job or be forced out and not claim Social Security until later.
if you don't need it.
And working for health insurance is a pet peeve of mine. That's not a great retirement strategy. So continuing to work just so that you have health insurance is not an ideal strategy. I've done shows on that. Put those up there. So plenty of references to that. But there's also this early retirement package. You know, when my dad was 55, he had a heart attack, quintuple bypass. My dad's still alive. He was a teacher, and he retired at 56, I believe. Had he waited another year, they were offering a bunch of teachers health insurance for life. He didn't get that, so he had to get health insurance outside of his old employer. But a lot of times you hear this early retirement packages, right? You see that in the big companies. They're trying to get, and because older employees are more expensive,
They are.
rightly so. They have a lot more experience, but sometimes there's people in the private industry that get early retirement packages. They're trying to get some turnover. But did you know that there are still some people that are forced out based on their age in this country?
Really? No.
We have any idea what professions?
Probably that require physical.
Commercial airline pilots.
Yeah. President should be
65.
one. President should be a job where you're forced out.
President of the United States.
We'd have
You
have
think?
two different people running this year, and it would be so much better.
So 65 for airline pilots. I think they're currently trying, and as of early 2024, trying to raise that to 67. You have pilots saying, I want to work past 65, because what happens is they still work. They just can't work for the major airlines with these big
Right.
jet, jumbo jets. They have to go to the private jets, and which is more demanding, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But this is a federal rule. FAA says you 65, you're out.
I like
air traffic
that rule,
controllers. Air traffic controllers must retire at 56.
What?
Yeah, I just saw that.
I
There's
get
a link
the
below for
pilots.
people watching on YouTube.
I get the pilots, but air traffic controllers?
Apparently, it's high stress job, so
Sure.
you need to have your wits about you. But then again, don't computers run the show on this now? Didn't we have a meltdown a couple years ago when the computer glitch happened and grounded the entire U.S.? In Florida, judges must retire at 75.
I like that. I wish they had that for the Supreme Court too.
In Minnesota, judges must retire at 70.
Yep.
Look at you, Tony, living in a state that really limits people. So why should judges retire at 70 and not the president? Why should judges in Minnesota and Florida have to retire at 75, say, but a Supreme Court justice can go on for life?
Doesn't make sense. The Supreme Court justice and the president should not be allowed to, they should have a set age limit, because at some point you get cognitive decline regardless.
Fine. Cognitive decline. But who's going to prove that?
I'm living proof.
See, here's the issue, Tony.
Every year.
You're quick to say we should have age limits.
Yeah. For certain
should they
jobs.
have an age limit on driver's licenses?
For certain jobs. Oh, on
What
driving.
about
Yes.
general public driving?
Yes. Don't let my dad hear me say this, but he's 80 and still driving, and I wish it was 75.
You say that now until you're 75, then you're like, you'll take my driver's license from my cold dead fingers.
Yeah.
You know, so
True.
Ruth Ginsburg, she was like 87 when she died.
Yes.
Oliver Wendell Holmes, was that what it was?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he was a Supreme Court judge. He was in his 90s, I think.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I know that one.
Yeah, so, you know, who's to say, though? You're pretty quick to start throwing limits on there. Capability, obviously physical capability, like you mentioned, but mental capacity, they go down as we age. And and should that factor in it? The ultimate issue that we face when it comes to this is physical, public safety versus competence.
Yeah. Like truck drivers,
right?
There should be an age limit for truck drivers.
Truck drivers. Now, so okay, age limit versus a competency test. See, that's the thing. It's how do you fairly judge someone's ability based on merit and skill, not on age? You know, is it ageist to just say we should have a 75 year old limit for a Florida judge? That's the law, so it's allowed. 56 seems young for an air traffic controller.
But as far as radio announcer goes or voiceover work, there should be no age limit, obviously.
Well, okay, let's go with the radio announcer bit for a minute.
Sure.
What was that guy's name that had his radio show that had that deep voice? He did the talk show, not Howard Stern, but his counterpart in New York. I can't remember his name. He died a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And he was on very, very limited time. He was like the figurehead of the show. Yeah. His voice was raspy, and it got to a point where you couldn't really understand a word he was saying.
Right.
And I was true. People are still listening to this guy. Yeah. But I wouldn't want him to be forced out if he could still draw an audience and people are still willing to pay. So my take is let the free market decide. Let the free market decide on when people should retire. Because it doesn't seem fair to just put a number. Because some people are competent. I have clients that are in their 70s and working. You know, there are financial advisors that are in their 80s that I know of. Yeah. They don't want to retire.
Me too. And they're they're doing radio shows talking about how to help you retire early, which I always find ironic and hilarious. It's like this 80-year, if you want to retire early, but wait, you're still working. So if you know how to retire early and you're big into planning, anyway.
That's an interesting dilemma right there. But then again, why should you retire if you're still doing a good job?
Yeah, I mean, it's because they love what they do, and as long as they can do it, they're going to do it. Yeah, a lot of people are like that. If you love your job.
Imus in the morning.
That's it. Imus. Yep. Was it Don Imus, I think?
Don Imus. So, I couldn't understand him. It literally, his voice,
No, at the end, yeah.
People still listening. So, but I didn't want to push him out and say you have to retire. But then when it comes to certain things, like in Minnesota, you got to be 70. Once you're 70, you can't be a judge. That makes sense.
Well, it's like Dick Clark. Dick Clark is a good example where, come on.
But people were still willing to pay and listen to him, right? And he was still willing to get paid. It wasn't high stakes, though. What Dick Clark was talking about wasn't high stakes, but a judge, high stakes. An airline pilot, that's high stakes because
public safety.
A truck driver, public safety. Yeah, truck driver. Public safety is an issue, but you can't just. I have a problem with just throwing an age out there. Because age is meaningless to me.
So maybe if there was a competency test, I'm not competent to say the word, but if there was a test you could give people, like you say, maybe that's the answer, competency tests.
Yeah, but there's so many different ways to measure that, and who's going to be the arbiter of which one's the best? Then you get the government involved.
Well, like the list. Can you repeat this list? TV, door, camera, the list.
Right. Right. But if you say, and that's what's happening in early 2024 with President Biden, they're questioning a lot of people have been questioning his competency for years,
Yeah.
but it's becoming pretty obvious to most people that
Yeah.
there's cognitive decline.
Yeah, for
So at
both
what point
candidates.
do you
To be fair, both candidates have shown, especially this year and in their campaign, that they both have cognitive decline, and that's I don't think a good thing for our country. So I think
But
with
you
this,
let the free market decide. Let the free, so then really though, we're talking about your own the people listening, this is your retirement. You might get the early retirement package, do the math. You might kind of get forced out silently to leave. No one's going to say got to leave because that's illegal. But if you're an airline pilot, they can. Maybe you leave on your own terms. Maybe you go to the private sector where they don't care about your age. But if you're at a point where you're kind of feeling like you're getting forced out, time to take control of that
right,
and plan your own retirement. Just because you're retired doesn't mean you have to stop working. That's the other thing. People don't, they could do a different job. You could do something else. You can volunteer. If it
right,
comes down to the money, though, you got to be more aggressive in your own planning and not get
right.
forced out. I
Yeah.
guess that's my point. But I say, get out of it. Don't have people tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Make your own decisions. And I don't like the idea of telling people forcing retirement, even the airline pilots. I feel safer knowing that a pilot might be 70 than someone that's 18.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
Right.
yeah. Yeah. You and me
So,
both. It goes
but
both.
all
It cuts
seven,
both ways. Yeah, it
so
cuts both ways.
you know what I mean. So
Yep.
anyway, now you can't be a judge much longer in
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, I think that the key here is to have a plan in place and do it on your own terms. And in order to do that, you need to work with a financial services professional like yourself. I think that's the
Right.
key. And so for our listeners out there, I know you love to hear from our listeners and get the comments, positive, negative feedback. We love feedback. I know you love feedback. So how can our listeners get a hold of you?
I'll put the phone number up after this. That's the best way. You call the number and you press number 5 for the radio show, and you can leave a message. I get messages all the time. You said this on the radio. Can you explain it? Or you were wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am, and I'll correct it. But
But
yeah,
you got to read off
or
the
just
number for our
yeah,
audio only
for the
listeners.
listeners on the podcast. It's 888-508-5935. Give me a call. Tell me what I did wrong. 888-508-5935. And I'll tell you this, Tony. A little free advice to anyone. If you're thinking about doing a career change in your 50s, just don't go into air traffic control because there's not enough runway, pardon the pun, to get to 56 when you're forced
Nice.
retirement.
Nice.
All right, everyone. Thanks again, Tony, for a good show. We'll catch everyone next week.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.